This presentation is about watercolor tools and tips. When I say the word watercolor, this is probably the image that pops into your mind, the little set with a closable case. This is called cake watercolor. Cakes are easy to use and less messy than some paints like tempera or acrylics, and the cakes last a long time, which makes them really economical. Some brands, such as this one here, which is Prang, come with removable pans that can be popped out and replaced. That allows you to keep frequently used colors like blue and green on hand. This set of 8 colors comes with a brush, and it is about $4. To buy a set of 12 replacement pans is $7. This type of cake watercolor is best used with older students in grades 4 to 6. The next type of watercolor is liquid watercolor, and this is great to use with younger students. I'd say grades K through 4, but older students can use it too. This is very concentrated and it must be diluted with water. It is reasonably priced. This set was about $34 and it will last for a long time. So just a couple of little drops mixed with water will make a good amount of paint. You do need to use special paper with watercolor. Watercolor paper has a bumpy texture called tooth, and the bumps make the paper more absorbent. The paper is really thick and strong so that it stands up to all of the water that gets placed on it. If you mix too much on top of the paper, you can start to deteriorate the paper. So sometimes you have to instruct your students, don't rub the paintbrush too long in one spot. The thickness of watercolor paper is measured in pounds. So this pad here is 140 pounds, which is a nice thick paper. You can use regular drawing paper if that's your last resort, but you really don't get very good results using drawing paper. So if you can afford it, I always recommend using the proper paper. Watercolor is meant to be used in layers. Watercolor is transparent and colors interact as you add them. One of the concepts that can be hard to get across to your students is to build up the layers and don't try to cover it in one coat. So as you can see in this goldfish, the first layer is very light and then more details are added and it gets darker and it looks better with more coats. Watercolor paint is concentrated and it is made to be mixed with water, hence the name. The more water you add, it looks lighter, and with less water, it's darker. So there's different ways that you can mix the watercolor. You can use the lid as a palette, or you can have a separate palette like seen in this photograph here, where you can add a little bit of water and mix it to the desired shade that you want. But one thing that you should instruct your students not to do is do not mix colors on top of the cake. For example, don't take green and mix it on top of the yellow because that makes the colors muddy. And be careful when using watercolor straight from the cake because it can be very dark, and if it's too concentrated, it basically will never dry and it will remain sticky forever. So remember the concept that watercolor is supposed to be transparent, so don't use it really, really dark, really concentrated straight off the cake. This is a good example of what it looks like when you contaminate your colors. So this should be avoided, and one way to avoid it is to always rinse your brush with clean water before changing to another color. And mix colors on a separate palette or the lid or on the watercolor paper, not on top of the cakes. Keep your colors bright and true and not dark and muddy. With younger kids, I would just use 1 cup of water and perhaps change it frequently. But with older kids, you can use the 3-cup brush cleaning method. I'd say grades 5 and 6. So what you do is fill up 3 cups of water at the beginning of your art making time and instruct the students to swoosh their brush in the first cup and then swoosh it in the second cup and then the third cup. So what happens is you end up with one cup being pretty dirty, the middle cup being kind of dirty, and the last cup being clean. So you use cup 3 when you need clean water for your paper or to mix with paint in your palette. It cuts down on the number of times that students have to go to the sink. Brush care. It's not good for brushes if you leave them submerged in a cup of water for long periods of time because it bends the bristles and it waterlogs the handles. So a better way is to place the brush across the cup. And after you clean the brush at the sink, use your fingers to make a nice point on the bristles. Watercolor brushes are special. They are different than acrylic or tempera brushes. They are soft and fluffy so that they can hold a lot of water. And they usually come in rounded or mop shapes, but you can get smaller detail brushes that are pointed, and they come in all different sizes. The last really essential tool that we're going to talk about today is the paper towel, and it is indispensable when working with watercolors. So it's used for soaking up excess paint from your brush or your paper, and a clean paper towel can be torn up and used to cover areas of your artwork when you are using techniques such as spattering or sponging. Well, that's it for these tips and techniques. Now it's time to make some great art.